Okay, everybody. Everybody around the table will be coming tomorrow, and we're going to do the lecture, which is the last Gosho, the reply to the mother of Ueno, on page 133. It's just long enough that I'm going to go ahead and read the Gosho now, so that when we do the lecture tomorrow, we won't go so far over an hour as we have many times in the past. Additionally, as soon as we get finished with this, which we will hit our goal of getting it done in September in the third quarter. The next time we get together, we will start Teachings for Victory Volume 6, Teachings for Victory Volume 6, pardon me. And in between that, I'm going to make an effort because, you know, the summer was very disruptive to us, to a lot of people throughout the world. I'm sure of that. I wasn't the only one. We weren't the only ones. But the bottom line is we've fallen a little bit behind in the pace of what I had wanted to try to accomplish in my own life for the sake of my children. And so what I'm going to be doing, first of all, I really appreciate that there are so many people that have started watching the videos. Like last video was like unbelievable. It's like over 800 people in a couple of weeks. That's pretty good. We're getting very close to 1,000 people that want to know when we do videos that they've subscribed. But let me tell everybody that's been watching recently for the last 2 or 3 years, you probably may have missed this whole hugely important lecture that I may end up having to go back to. But the big thing is that we've never actually read the text of the Gosho because it's one of the longest and most profound Goshos of the Daishonen's teachings. So I'm going to read the opening of the eyes, part 1 and part 2. As a segue into finishing RP, the Rekha Rajani project here, and do all of the OTT. I'm ready to go on the OTT now. Okay, so that's all got to be done between the actual study meetings that we have to continue to go forward, because we still got a volume 7 after volume 6. And there's a lot of other things that we need to read. We need to read the Lotus Sutra. We need to read all kinds of things that I haven't been able to do for everyone. Everybody at the table has pretty much done all that. So right now, what I'm going to do is tomorrow's last Gosho from volume 5 is going to be Reply to the Mother of Ueno. And I'm going to read that to you now so we can get through the lecture from President Ikeda with some congruence here. Okay, by the way, this is my marker from my Sophie, my number 7, my niece, and it's very special to me, and I hope you don't think that I look silly using a little giraffe as my place marker, but when a child decides that they want you to have this because they think what you're doing is important, you got to reinforce that. Okay, so here we go. On page 1072 of the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 1, Reply to the Mother of Ueno. The background starts on page 1077, and I'll start there. Background. This letter was written at Minobu in the 10th month of the 3rd year of Koan, 1280, to the lay nun Ueno, the mother of Nanjo Tokimitsu. Nichiren Daishonin acknowledges offerings that had been sent to him on the occasion of the 49th day memorial service following the death of her youngest son, Shichiro Goro, and encourages her in the face of her grief. So I know there are many people that have had to deal with the death of something that they love, someone they loved. This is a very profound perspective of understanding of the Buddhist principle that the Daishonin encourages us is the case, is the truth. And President Ikeda will embellish that completely as we go along tomorrow. He says, the lay nun Ueno was the daughter of Matsuno Ryokuro Seimen and the wife of Nanjo Hyoe Shichiro, the steward of Ueno village in the Fuji district of Suruga province, and Nanjo Tokimitsu's dad. The lay nun's husband passed away in 1265 while she was pregnant with their youngest son, Shichiro Goro. Okay, so she had 2 boys, Nanjo and Shichiro. Shichiro was 16 years old when this all went down. Shichiro Goro visited Minobu together with his elder brother Tokimitsu to see the Daishonin on the 15th day of the 6th month in 1280. The Daishonin had great expectations for the young man, but he died suddenly at the age of 16 on the 5th day of the 9th month of that same year. No sooner had the Daishonin received the news of Shichiro Goro's death than he wrote a letter of condolence to the lay nun Ueno and Nanjo Tokimitsu. This present letter is also called On Intermediate Existence. Intermediate existence indicates the interval of time between death and rebirth and was widely believed to last for 49 days. On the basis of this belief, people conducted a memorial service on the 49th day. To reassure the lay nun Ueno that her son had attained Buddhahood, the Daishonin discusses the great benefit gained from embracing the Lotus Sutra and asserts that a votary of the sutra will be protected by Shakyamuni Buddha and all other Buddhas. Okay, so it's not like Shakyamuni's a special Buddha. Shakyamuni's one of all other Buddhas. Understand that. Okay, so... and I'm not disrespecting Shakyamuni when I say, he's not a special Buddha. What I'm saying is Buddhahood is Buddhahood. Okay, the original teacher is Nichiren, and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the original teaching. So, reply to Mother of Ueno, starting on page 1072. The Daishonin says to her in his reply, I have received the offerings that you sent for the 49th day ceremony marking the passing of your son, the late Nanjo Shichiro Goro. As noted on the list, they consist of 2 strings of coins, 1 horseload of polished rice, 1 horseload of yams, pounded bean curd, konnyaku, 1 basket of persimmons, 50 citrons, and other items. For the sake of your son's repose, I have recited the entire Lotus Sutra once and the verse section of its lifespan chapter several times and chanted the Daimoku hundreds or thousands of times. The sutra known as the Lotus Sutra is a scripture that has no match among all the sacred teachings of the Buddha's lifetime. And as indicated by its words, between Buddhas, it can only be understood between one Buddha and another. Those at the stage of near perfect enlightenment or below, on down to ordinary mortals, cannot fathom it. This is why Bodhisattva Nagarjuna stated in his treatise on the great perfection of wisdom that persons below the level of Buddha should simply have faith. And in that way, they can attain Buddhahood. All right? Faith in the teachings of the teacher. In the Teacher of the Law chapter, in the 4th volume of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha states, Medicine King, now I say to you, I have preached various sutras, and among those sutras, the lotus is the foremost. Okay, so he's going to go through all the declaratives that say, this isn't a hypothetical, this isn't me trying to make this up. Shakyamuni Buddha qualified unequivocally that the Lotus Sutra was a teaching he had never revealed until he spoke of it, and it had never been known before until he spoke of it. Okay, so, and that it's the foremost truth that everything had been leading to. So he's going, among those sutras, the lotus is the foremost. In the 5th volume, it says, Manjushri, this Lotus Sutra is the secret storehouse of the Buddhas, the thus come ones. Among the sutras, it holds the highest place. In the 7th volume, we read, so this Lotus Sutra is likewise. Among all the sutras, it holds the highest place. We also read, this Lotus Sutra, shines the brightest. So this sutra is the most honored. So these are all references to the sutra itself, qualifying this is the ultimate teaching that everything should be based on in the future forever, even in the 5th 500-year period and beyond, as it'll be clarified by the original teacher at that time. These passages of scripture from the Lotus Sutra do not represent some doctrine that I have put forward on my own. That Daishonin is saying, this is all coming from the sutras. I'm not making it up. They are the truthful words of the Buddha, and hence it is impossible that they could be in error. So he's saying, since Shakyamuni qualified these things to be such, he couldn't have done so by mistake, and they must be exactly what he's saying they are. Do you understand? Okay, so if someone born a commoner should claim to stand equal to a samurai, he would surely be faulted. Now, and how much more so if he should claim that he is equal to the ruler of the nation, or even superior to the ruler. Not only would he himself be punished, but his father and mother and his wife and children would be made to suffer as well. It is like the case of a great fire that burns down houses, or of a great tree that, in falling, brings down the little trees around it as well. It is the same with the Buddhist teachings. This is why he's going to qualify why it's so important to focus on the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and specifically because it's the latter day of the law, his Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It is the same with the Buddhist teachings. People who rely on the various sutras expounded in the flower garland, agama, correct and equal, and wisdom periods, such as the Mahavajracana or the Amida Sutra, regard the one that they believe in as best, without distinguishing the relative worth of the sutras. Thus, they say, our Amida Sutra is equal to the Lotus Sutra, or it is superior. Fellow believers, hearing their own sutra praised in this way, think it is a cause for joy. On the contrary, however, they are committing a serious offense, and the teachers of such doctrines, they are committing a serious offense, and the teachers of such doctrines, their disciples, and their lay supporters will fall as swiftly as flying arrows into the evil paths. They'll end up going in the opposite direction that they think that they are seeking by adhering to teachings that have already been qualified as no longer relevant to this current moment. However, he says, those who declare that the Lotus Sutra is superior to all the other sutras are justified in doing so. So I have no problem in saying what I'm saying, because Nichiren Daishonin just said, Tom, you're nailing it. In fact, they will enjoy great benefits, and my life reflects that. This is because their declaration accords with the sutra, with what the sutra itself says. Okay? Prefacing the Lotus Sutra is a work called the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra. And we all know that's part of the Threefold Lotus Sutra, and it's available online at nichirenlibrary.org. You can read what he's saying from the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra if you want to go look it up. Prefacing the Lotus Sutra is a work called the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra. It is like the vanguard of generals who go before the procession of a great king to quell disturbances. This Immeasurable Meaning Sutra states, in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth. These words are like the great bows that the generals carry to drive away the king's enemies with arrows, or the swords with which they cut those enemies down. They are like a royal proclamation, sharp as a sword, directed to members of the Flower Garland School who read only the Flower Garland Sutra, the priests of the Precept School with their Agama Sutras, the Nembutsu believers with their Meditation Sutra, and the True Word teachers with their Mahavajracana Sutra, chastising them for failing to follow the Lotus Sutra and bringing them into submission. They are like Yoshiike attacking Sadato, or Yoritomo destroying the forces of Kiyomori. These words of the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra in these more than 40 years are the sword and rope of the Wisdom King Immovable, or the bow and arrows of the Wisdom King Craving Filled, the two center right and left characters on the Gohonzon. It says, when the late Nanjo Goro made his way across the mountains of death. Now he's talking about the kid again. Now, and understand that this young man only died when he was 16, okay? So that automatically is a teaching for me. Now, you can take it however you might just decide to, but I've chanted about this a lot, and it tells me I should never take for granted how long I'm going to live or how much time I have to preach the law. That's why I got to get after it now, okay? So please understand, I'm not trying to go into overdrive without having given it a lot of thought, consideration, and chanted a lot of daimoku about it. I'm going to be telling you things that I probably would have never planned to talk about. The world has changed a lot. Let me start again. When the late Nanjo Goro, at the top of page 1073, second column, When the late Nanjagoro made his way across the mountains of death and the river of three crossings, the soldiers who escorted him and repulsed the mountain bandits of earthly desires and the pirates of past offenses, and allowed him to proceed safely to the pure land of Eagle Peak, where these words of the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth. The expedient, let me say it again, I got a little emotional there. We're all going to go through this, by the way. Okay, what he's describing is the process, the journey that we'll all experience, and he's using metaphors to express it to the mother of Ueno, Nanjagoro's mom. But in reality, you should take all this to heart. I mean, this is the Daishonin explaining the truth. He's not bullshitting her to make her feel better. He's qualifying in a manner that she can understand the process that occurs for people that achieve birth and death in the realm of Buddhahood. Now, what he's describing is the ninth consciousness. And it only is there for those that have attained Buddhahood in their present form. For the wannabes that couldn't cut it because it was too hard, this is what you can look forward to in a lifetime when you do have the strength to sustain the fight against the devilish functions of the fundamental darkness. But this only occurs to people that are in the 10th realm, in the 9 realms. When the late Nanjagoro made his way across the mountains of death and the river of three crossings, the soldiers who escorted him, the protective influences that escorted him and repulsed the mountain bandits of earthly desires, which is another way of saying any element of that might try to make him regress or not acknowledge the advance that he's made, the pirates of past offenses. Okay, so he's saying everything that Nanjagora may have done in his karmic back past has already been expiated by attaining Buddhahood in his present form. That's the message that he's trying to deliver to his mom, and that same message applies to us. Okay, so again, the soldiers who escorted him and repulsed the mountain bandits of earthly desires and the pirates of past offenses. Bandits steal. Pirates steal. These are the functions in life that take away from us the vitality of the original state, that pose the difficulty in making it across the mountains of death to the 9th realm, to the 9th consciousness, okay? He says, and allowed him to proceed safely to the pure land of Eagle Peak, which is Buddhahood, which is the 9th consciousness. Were these words of the Immeasurable Meanings Sutra saying, in these more than 40 years, I have not revealed the truth? Because what's the key to him saying, in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth? It's the fact that he's now going to reveal the truth in the Lotus and the Nirvana Sutras, okay? And that it has never been known before in the qualification that it will take on in the 5th 500-year period as Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. He goes on to say on page 1073, the expedient means, second column, the expedient means chapter in the first volume of the Lotus Sutra states, the world-honored one has long expounded his doctrines and now must reveal the truth. It also says, honestly discarding expedient means, I will preach only the unsurpassed way. What does that honestly discarding expedient means mean? What that actually is, the function of realizing that all of the teachings were expedient means that preceded the Lotus Sutra, that were all in measure a path to get to the Lotus Sutra. So once you understand that the Lotus Sutra is the supreme teaching, you don't adhere to Tibetan Buddhism anymore. You don't do Nimbutsu anymore. That's honestly discarding those expedient means. You no longer put any faith in that teaching. You don't need to. The supreme teaching of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo supersedes the effectiveness of any of that kind of activity to the point you shouldn't even be doing it or thinking about it. You're keeping it alive when it was meant to be in the past. Okay, this is the now and the future, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Honestly discarding expedient means I will preach only the unsurpassed way. In the 5th volume, we read, only the bright jewel that is in his top knot. This one jewel exists only on the top knot of the king's head. You know, the parable of the jewel in the top knot. And the way that the powerful ruler did when he took the brightest jewel that he had guarded for so long and finally gave it away. The import of these passages is this: the great collection of scriptures has been brought to this country of Japan, numbering 7,399 volumes. And each one of these various scriptures is a follower and retainer of the Lotus Sutra. To illustrate, the men and women in this country number 4,994,828, but all are subjects of one man, the ruler of the country. As for the significance of these various scriptures, let me give an analogy that even an uncomprehending woman can understand immediately. Suppose that one is building a great pagoda. In addition to the lumber to be used in the pagoda itself, one gathers together a large quantity of small timbers and uses them to build a scaffolding 10 or 20 feet in height. After one has done this, one uses the original lumber to construct the pagoda. And when the pagoda is completed, one then removes the scaffolding and discarding it. Okay, and again, the scaffolding consists of large quantity of small timbers. So they're small. They're not compared to the good wood that's used to actually make the structure. They're just there for the support of the building of that structure. He's using that analogy to say all the other sutras were just the small timbers for the scaffolding of the erection of the true teaching that's contained within the Lotus Sutra. He goes, and then when the pagoda is completed, one then removes the scaffolding and discards those lesser teachings, and leaves the pagoda, the supreme teaching, the correct teaching, in place. Now the scaffolding at the top of 1074, now the scaffolding represents the various other sutras, which was pretty obvious, and the great pagoda, the Lotus Sutra, which was pretty obvious. When the Buddha preached the other sutras, he was in effect erecting a scaffolding in preparation for the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. In the same manner as the sutra describes when it says, honestly discarding expedient means, persons who put their faith in the Lotus Sutra should first cast aside and fling away the Namu Amida Butsu invocation based on the Amida and other sutras, the teachings of the True Word School based on the Mahavrachana and the other sutras, and the 250 precepts of the Precept School based on the Agama Sutras and other teachings, and then they should embrace the Lotus Sutra alone. When one is preparing to build a great pagoda, the scaffolding is of great importance. But once the pagoda is completed, then the scaffolding is removed and thrown away. This is the meaning of the passage about honestly discarding expedient means. I won't reread that because I think it was crystal clear. Though the scaffolding is necessary to complete the pagoda, no one would ever dream of discarding the pagoda and worshiping the scaffolding. And yet the people who seek the way in the world today spend their whole lives reciting Namo Amida Butsu only, and never once chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. They are like persons who discard the pagoda and worship the scaffolding. These are examples of the secular saying, seemingly wise, actually foolish. The late Shichiro Goro did not take after other people in Japan today. Though still a youth, he followed in the footsteps of his sagacious father, and at an early age, having not yet turned 20, he began chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and thus he became a Buddha. Him and me and President Kate all started chanting when we were 19. This is what the sutra means when it says, not a one will fail to attain Buddhahood. I hope that if you, his loving mother, are thinking with longing about your son, you will chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and pray to be reborn in the same place as the late Shichiro Goro and your husband, the late Nanjo. The seeds of one kind of plant are all the same. They are different from the seeds of other plants. If all of you nurture the same seeds of Myoho Renge Kyo in your hearts, then you will be reborn together in the same land of Myoho Renge Kyo. When the three of you are reunited there face to face, how great your joy will be. Now when we open the Lotus Sutra and read what it says, we find these words. The thus come one will cover them with his robe, and they will also be protected and kept in mind by the Buddhas who are now present in other regions. The meaning of this passage is that the Buddhas of the 10 directions will all assemble in throngs and fill in the lands to the east, west, north, and south in the 8 directions, the major world system, and all 410,000 million Nayutas of lands. They will be seated side by side like the stars in the heavens or the rows of rice and hemp plants on the earth, and will guard and protect the votaries of Lotus Sutra, just as the various ministers and subjects guard and protect the heir of a great ruler. Now, this is the promise of Nichiren Daishonin. That's why when I pray to ask for the protection of this thing, this influence that he's discussing here, I do it without any doubt in my mind that it's there. Any doubt in my mind that I can reach it, and not any doubt in my mind that I can manifest that protection. But that's because I have such faith. And why do I have such faith? Because I've seen this truth represented in my daily life over and over and over and over again, to the point that now I'm an old man and I'm thinking, shit, I need to share some of this stuff with other people. Maybe I was just a little bit lucky that I had such great teachers. So I'm trying to emulate what they've taught me for your sake. Understand that he's again telling you, don't freak out about life and death. Get squared away on the life and death issue on the front end. Develop your faith and discard the bullshit on the front end. Listen to the teaching of the original teacher, okay, and have confidence in it. And then don't doubt it. And if you don't doubt it and you chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, you're going to be rewarded every single freaking time. Yes. If you don't give up. Yes. As long as you give the opportunity for the power to be expressed, it shall be. I don't care who you are. The meaning of this passage is that the Buddhas of the 10 directions will all assemble in throngs. That's how he's describing it. And fill in the lands to the east, west, north, and south in the 8 directions, the major world system, and all 410,000 million Nayutas of lands. They will be seated side by side like the stars in the heavens or the rows of rice and hemp plants on the earth, and will guard and protect the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, just as the various ministers and subjects guard and protect the heir of a great ruler. To be guarded by the 4 heavenly kings, also on the Gohonzon, and their retainers is a great honor. But with the protection of all the 4 heavenly kings, all the stars and constellations, this is all represented on the Gohonzon, all the deities of the sun and the moon, all the chakras and brahmas, one can be completely confident, he's saying. You're not just getting the protection of the 4 heavenly kings, you're getting the protection of everything that's already vowed to protect you as a votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law, according to the teachings of Shakyamuni. One can be completely confident. Moreover, all of the persons of the 2 vehicles, all the bodhisattvas, Bodhisattva Maitreya, in the inner court of the Tushita heaven, Bodhisattva earth repository on Mount Karadiya, Bodhisattva perceiver of the world sounds on Mount Potolaka, and Bodhisattva Manjushri on Mount Clear and Cool, each together with all of their followers. That's a shitload of people there, man. That's a shitload of entities that have qualified. I got to cover your ass. So why shouldn't you be confident? Why shouldn't you be confident? Doubt-free faith is the key to unlocking the real power of Buddhahood. Okay, so if you believe Nichiren's telling the truth and would not lie, why wouldn't you just believe what he's saying? So one may indeed rest assured. And furthermore, Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions will come of their own accord and watch over one through all the hours of the day and night, which is an honor beyond the power of words to express. So I guess bodhisattvas of the earth get treated pretty well. It's a good trade-off. It was this splendid sutra that the late Shichiro Goro, this is the second paragraph, it's first full paragraph, column 1, page 1075. It was this splendid sutra that the late Shichiro Goro put his faith in and through which he attained Buddhahood. And today, on the 49th day following his passing, all the Buddhas have surely gathered about him in the pure land of Eagle Peak, seating him on their palms, patting his head, embracing him, and rejoicing, welcoming him with their affection, as one would welcome a moon that has just risen or blossoms that have just burst into bloom. When we consider why the Buddhas of the 10 directions throughout the 3 existences should so firmly protect the Lotus Sutra, we come to understand that it is only natural. For the Lotus Sutra is the father and mother of the Buddhas. They all attained Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which is hidden in the depths of the Lotus Sutra. For the Lotus Sutra is the father and mother of all the Buddhas of the 3 existences and the 10 directions. There are no Buddhas that have not become Buddhas because of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It is their wet nurse and their Lord. Frogs feed on the sound of their mother's voice, and if they cannot hear their mother's voice, they will not grow. The insect called Kalakula, feeds on wind, and if the wind does not blow, it will not grow. Fish must have water, and birds depend on trees to build their nests in. In the same way, for the Buddhas, the Lotus Sutra is their source of life, their sustenance, and their dwelling. As fish live in water, so the Buddhas live in this sutra. A Buddha dwells in trees, so the Buddhas dwell in this sutra. As birds dwell in trees, so the Buddhas dwell in this sutra. As the moon's reflection lodges in the water, so the Buddhas lodge in this sutra. You should understand that in a land where this sutra does not exist, there can be no Buddhas. This is pretty clear instruction here, folks. In ancient times, there lived a sovereign named King Rinda, who ruled over the southern continent of Jambudvipa. What was it that this king required for sustenance? He listened to the neighing of white horses, and this became his food. As long as the white horses neighed, he grew more youthful, his complexion glowed, his spirit was vigorous, his physical strength remained undiminished, and he was able to conduct the affairs of state justly. Therefore, a great many white horses were gathered and cared for in his country. In this respect, he was like the ruler of Wei, who gathered a great many cranes, or Emperor Tetsung, who loved fireflies. The white horses would neigh only if there were white swans who were singing, and accordingly a number of white swans had also been gathered. One time, for some reason, all of the white swans disappeared. And as a result, the white horses no longer neighed. So the king's sustenance came to an end. And he was like full-blown blossoms that wilt under the dew, or a round moon that becomes shrouded in clouds. When it became apparent that the king was about to expire, his consort, his heir, the high ministers, and all the people throughout the kingdom turned pale, like a child who had just been separated from his mother, and wept their sleeves with tears, crying, "What shall we do? What shall we do?" In that country, there were many followers of non-Buddhist teachings, persons like the Zen, Nembutsu believers, the True Word teachers, and the precepts priests of our own time. In addition, there were disciples of the Buddha, persons like the members of the Lotus School today. These two groups were on very bad terms, as incompatible as fire and water, or as hostile toward each other as the people called Hu and Ye. Top of page 1076, first column. the ruler issued a proclamation saying, the ruler issued a proclamation saying, if these non-Buddhists cause the horses to neigh, then I will abolish the Buddhist teachings and put my faith entirely in the non-Buddhist doctrines, honoring them, thank you, dear, honoring them as the heavenly deities do chakra. But if the disciples of the Buddha cause the horses to neigh, then I will cut off the heads of all the non-Buddhists, seize their dwellings, and hand them over to the disciples of the Buddha. At this, the non-Buddhists turned pale with fear, and the disciples of the Buddha fell to lamenting. But since that alone would not resolve matters, the non-Buddhists took their turn first. For 7 days they carried out their practices, but no white swans gathered around, and the white horses failed to neigh. It was the turn of the Buddha's disciples, and they were assigned the next 7 days for the performance of their prayers. At that time there was a young monk named Ashvaghosha, or horse neigh, who, relying upon the Lotus Sutra, the object of devotion for all the Buddhas, for 7 days offered his prayers, whereupon white swans came flying to the platform where he was praying. As soon as one of these birds would utter a cry, one of the white horses would neigh. The king, hearing the sound of the horses, rose up from his sickbed, and all the persons who had gathered there, beginning with the ruler's consort, turned toward Ashvaghosha, bowed to him in reverence. So the white swans came, 1, 2, 3, then 10, 100, 1,000, filling the kingdom. And the white horses neighed, 1 horse, 2 horses, then 100, 1,000 white horses, all constantly neighing. When the king heard this sound, his face became that of a 30-year-old man. His mind was as clear and as bright as the sun, and his administration was upright and fair, so that the reign of Amrita, like a mystical, wonderful elixir, Amrita, it's a dew from the heavens, so that the rain of Amrita fell down from the heavens. The common people bowed before his commands as though before a wind, and the kingdom prospered for countless ages. The Buddhas are similar to this. Many treasure Buddhas, during the time when the Lotus Sutra does not appear, remains extinct. But in an age when the sutra is recited, he makes his appearance in the world. And the same is true of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Since the Lotus Sutra possesses this wonderful, powerful, how could any person who upholds this sutra be abandoned by the sun goddess, the great Bodhisattva Hachiman, or by the great Bodhisattva Fuji Sengen? This is truly reassuring. On the other hand, if a country should oppose this sutra, then no matter how sincerely its people may offer up prayers, that country will inevitably experience the 7 disasters. You may be certain that it will be overthrown and destroyed by another country, like a ship that encounters a storm in the midst of the ocean, or like grass and trees that are withered by a great drought. So don't be afraid when you hear that your government might try to oppress you for practicing this Buddhism. They're in a process of change. In a similar manner in Japan today, no matter how prayers are offered up, because the people make light of Nichiren and his followers, the votaries of the Lotus Sutra, none of their various ways of praying are effective, and instead the forces of the great kingdom of the Mongols come to attack. Already the country is on the verge of destruction. Watch carefully from now on. Matters cannot continue as they are at present. You should understand once and for all that this is entirely due to the fact that the people all harbor enmity toward the Lotus Sutra. It has now been 49 days since your son, the late Shichiro Goro, passed away. Though impermanence is the way of all living beings, even one who merely hears the news of a person's having passed away finds it hard to bear. How much more deeply, then, must his mother or his wife grieve? I believe I can understand something of your feelings. Though children may be young in years or more mature, though they may be ugly or even physically handicapped, their parents love them nonetheless. In your case, your child was a son, and in addition, he was blessed in every way, and he had a warm heart. When your husband, the late Ueno, preceded you in death, He was still in the prime of his life, and your grief on that occasion was no shallow matter. Had you not been pregnant with his child, I know you would have followed him through fire and water. Yet when his son was safely born, you felt that it would be unthinkable to entrust his upbringing to another so that you could put an end to your life. Thus, you encouraged yourself and spent the following 14 or 15 years raising your children. How then are you to endure what has happened? You must have thought that in the future you would have 2 sons to rely upon. And yet on the 5th day of the 9th month of this year, this younger son, like the moon hidden in the clouds, like blossoms scattered by the wind, passed from sight. As you wondered whether or not you were dreaming, lamenting at how long the dream goes on, you felt that this dream is indeed like reality, and 49 days had already passed. And if it is indeed real, how will you bear it? The full-blown flower remains on the... I'm so sorry. I can't see. The full-blown flower. And it is indeed, and if it is indeed real, how will you bear it? The full-blown flower remains on the tree, while the bud just about to open has withered away. The aged mother remains behind while the young son is departed. How heartless is the transience of the world. Now you must shun and abandon this heartless world, entrusting yourself to the Lotus Sutra in which the late Shichiro Goro placed his faith, and quickly reach the eternally abiding and indestructible pure land of Eagle Peak. He's saying, now you got to attain Buddhahood in your present form. Your son's father is on Eagle Peak. His mother remains in the Sahe world. I sympathize with the feelings of the late Shichiro Goro, who is in the interval between the two of you. There is much more I would like to say, but I shall end here with my deepest respect, Nichiren. And I don't know if anybody caught the analogy of the white horses and the white swans and the king. President Keita will get into that in the lecture, but it's very profound. You are a white swan. Take care. See you tomorrow.